From the very beginning, The Bad Guys doesn't feel like other films from DreamWorks Animation. The opening scene of The Bad Guys is the longest one-shot take ever in a DreamWorks animation film. A Pulp Fiction homage centered around Mr. Wolf and Mr. Snake, two members of a criminal gang known as the Bad Guys. These two discuss birthdays at a diner before heading off to a bank robbery and getaway. Like the rest of The Bad Guys, the scene doesn't rely on goofy gags or over-the-top jokes, but rather the focus is on dialogue, character, and the dynamic between these two. Add to that a gorgeous animation style that gives a 2D feeling to 3D animation that feels equally inspired by Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The Adventures of Tintin, 2010's The Illusionist. The Bad Guys is a refreshing animated film that is by far one of DreamWorks Animation's best. In addition to Mr. Wolf and Mr. Snake, rounding out the Bad Guys team is the hacking expert, Ms. Tarantula, the team's muscle, Mr. Piranha, and the master of disguise, Mr. Shark. The Bad Guys decide to pull off their biggest heist yet, stealing the Golden Dolphin, a Good Samaritan award going to the guinea pig humanitarian, Professor Rupert Marmalade. During the heist, Mr. Wolf helps an older woman and is given praise for his goodness. For the first time, Mr. Wolf sees the benefit of now being a bad guy. When the gang gets caught in the middle of the Golden Dolphin heist, Mr. Wolf convinces the Red Fox Governor Diane Foxing that instead of arresting the team, she should let Professor Marmalade rehabilitate the crew, turning the bad guys into the good guys.
The bad guys become the good guys so we can stay the bad guys. You know what I'm saying?
It's fantastic! Wolf, you're a genius!
While Mr. Wolf plays off this choice as part of a larger plan, Mr. Wolf is also on his way to realizing that being good might not be so bad after all. First-time director Pierre Perifel, who has worked in animation on such projects as 2006's Curious George, Monsters vs. Aliens, The Illusionist, and the Kung Fu Panda series, directs The Bad Guys more like an action film than an animated film. Every frame of The Bad Guys is full of life and excitement, a beautiful film that wears its cinematic loves on its sleeve. Amongst a giant action sequence, there might be a quick reference to the work of Hurge or a subtle nod to any number of heist films. Thanks to the script by Etan Cohen, which embraces the action and heist nature of the story without succumbing to the more bombastic and tired jokes that can become commonplace in large-scale animated films. The Bad Guys are also impeccably cast, with particularly solid voice performances by Rockwell and Marin. Rockwell nails the sly attitude the character needs while balancing the line between good and bad. Marin is especially fun as Mr. Snake, a grumpy safecracker who is Mr. Wolf's best friend and the most reticent to change. But this entire team is particularly wonderful, especially when we get to see them in action during one of their many large-scale thefts. But the joy of The Bad Guys comes in its ability to feel fresh in a film style that often doesn't. The Bad Guys look stunning throughout, charming and exciting in tone, and with a lovely voice cast that brings this extremely fun story about friendship, self-improvement, and grand theft to life. The Bad Guys might be DreamWorks' best non-sequel since 2010's Megamind or even Kung Fu Panda. Much like what Megamind did with superhero films or Kung Fu Panda did for martial arts films, The Bad Guys brings a deep love for heist films to this animated adventure, and in doing so, creates one of the year's best animated films.